Every child develops at their own pace, right? But for some kids, the challenges they face are pretty significant. What if I told you this affects about 1 in every 10 children across the entire globe? Yeah, it's not some rare thing. It's a hidden global reality. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and really look at the true scale and impact of developmental disabilities. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll dig into why this is such a hidden issue in the first place. Then, we'll get into the numbers. And trust me, they're staggering. After that, we'll explore just how complex this all is, see how where you live plays a massive role, and finally, we'll tie it all together to understand why this is a conversation that, honestly, all of us should be having. For the longest time, developmental disabilities have kind of been in the shadows. And a big reason why is that they're not always something you can see. A child might be dealing with a learning disability that you wouldn't notice just by looking at them. But it becomes clear when you see how they're doing with schoolwork or trying to make friends. That's why we really have to look a little deeper. So, let's get on the same page. What exactly are we talking about here? Well, think of developmental disabilities as this broad category of challenges, things that can affect how a child learns, communicates, or even just plays. And the key thing, as you can see, is that these aren't just small hiccups. We're talking about significant hurdles that can really shape a child's entire life path. Now, here's the part that really surprised me when I first dug into this. Developmental disabilities are way, way more common than most of us think. The data tells a really powerful story, and it's one that we all need to hear. All right, let's talk numbers, because the data we have on this is absolutely mind-blowing, and it's probably going to challenge everything you thought you knew about this topic. Okay, before I flip to the next slide, just take a second and guess. What number pops into your head? 1 in 100? Maybe 1 in 50? Let's see what the research actually says. Get this, 1 in 10. 1 out of every 10 children worldwide has a developmental disability. Just think about that. That means in your kid's classroom, on their sports team, right in your own neighborhood, there's a very good chance there's a child who's navigating these kinds of challenges every single day. 1 in 10. And to put that into a global perspective, that's over 300 million children and teenagers. Let that number just sink in for a minute. It's so massive, it's almost hard to even wrap your head around. So this is a real game changer in how we think about this. We have to stop seeing developmental disabilities as just these rare individual problems. We need to see them for what they really are, a shared global reality that touches millions of families in every single country, from your hometown to the other side of the planet. Okay, so now we get just how big this issue is. Let's talk about what it actually looks like on the ground. You should really think of developmental disability as a big umbrella term, and under that umbrella, you've got this huge, diverse range of experiences. Everything from some mild learning challenges to really significant communication difficulties. So on one end of the spectrum, you might have a kid who has a tough time focusing in class, but for the most part gets along just fine. But on the other end, you could have a child who needs constant, dedicated support just to communicate with their family and friends. It's an enormous spectrum, and every single child's experience is completely unique. And here's another really interesting layer to this. The older kids get, the more likely they are to actually be identified. Just look at this chart. For little kids, under 5, the rate is about 7.5%. But for teenagers, it almost doubles to 14%. Now, this isn't because more kids are suddenly developing these issues. It's because we're just getting better at noticing them. I mean, think about it, right? A 5-year-old's world is pretty straightforward. But as kids get older and move through school, life gets way more complex. Suddenly, they're expected to write essays, tackle tricky math problems, and figure out complicated social stuff. And that's usually when these underlying challenges can become a lot more obvious. And there's another fascinating wrinkle in the data. Boys are diagnosed with developmental disabilities more often than girls. Now, why is that? Well, researchers are still trying to pin it down, but they're looking at everything from biological and neurological factors to even the different social expectations we have for boys and girls as they grow up. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit, because it turns out that where a child is born has a huge impact on whether they get the support they need. It really is a tale of two worlds, and the differences are pretty stark. Just take a look at this. The data shows that in some parts of the world, the rate is around 5%, but in other areas, it can shoot past 14%. So what in the world is going on here? Why such a massive gap? Well, it pretty much all comes down to resources. In countries with good healthcare, solid nutrition, and inclusive education, kids are just more likely to get identified early and get the help they need. But in places with widespread poverty and fewer services, well, those kids are far more likely to fall through the cracks. It's really that simple. I mean, just imagine two kids, both with the exact same learning disability. One is born in a wealthy country with access to the best specialists and schools. The other is born in a poor country with underfunded schools and a shortage of doctors. Which one of those kids do you think has a better shot at reaching their full potential? So we've covered a ton of ground. We've seen how widespread this issue is, how incredibly complex it is, and how it plays out so differently around the world. But what does all of this actually mean? And why should you care? Let's wrap this up. You know, the first step to solving any problem is just admitting you have one. And when it comes to developmental disabilities, we have a really big one. Just by understanding the true scale of what we're talking about, we can start having the kinds of conversations that lead to real, meaningful change. And this data, it isn't just for scientists in a lab. It's for all of us. It's for teachers trying to build more inclusive classrooms. It's for doctors trying to give better care. And critically, it's for policymakers who have the power to build a better, more supportive future for all children. And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. We know now that this is a fundamental reality for 1 out of every 10 children on this planet. So the question we all have to ask ourselves is this: are our societies, our communities, our schools, our governments truly prepared to give every single one of those children the support they need to not just get by, but to actually thrive?